Let me get started. Hello, everybody. Welcome, everybody. Let me get to the spot. This is Carlton Hamilton, and this is Plan Your Greatness. I am your gracious host, Carlton Hamilton. Now, how many of you know that song, recognize that song? Some of you know it from a movie, and I think it was called Rain on Me. Adam Sandler was in it. Don Cheadle was in it. But do you know who that group is and what kind of the time? That is The Who. Now, when I was playing summer ball before I started playing professional baseball, I had a roommate from Northern California. He went to Cal Berkeley. Very smart dude. He was our catcher and first baseman, Robert Leibzeit. His favorite group was The Who. So I was hearing all of this music, and me growing up in Chicago, R&B, hip hop is just now coming, rap is coming up on the scene. So I didn't listen to any of that. He introduced me to a whole genre of music, and that group was playing over and over and over again. So when I saw that movie with Adam Sandler and Don Cheadle, I heard that song. I was like, God, that song sounds familiar. And so just today, as I was going over talking and what was going on in that movie, it just reminded me of that. And I just wanted to share that with you guys. Very powerful movie, very powerful voice. Pete Townsend singing for The Who. All right, I know, brother singing The Who, talking about The Who and stuff like that. All right, and I got my Superfly shirt on, so it's confusing you all over the place. All right, but let's get right to it. We are breaking down each one of my sections of the book. And right now we're going through the introduction. And in the introduction, I let you into my world, a little bit about me and what I was going through, and more specifically, the 5 stages of grief that I went through in the course of my life, writing this book, and becoming the person that I am to this day. Some very important things I want to share with you is that, when people are going through the 5 stages of grief, which are denial, then there's anger, then there's bargaining, depression, which is what we're going to cover today, and acceptance. Some people don't make it out. Some people get stuck at one of those stages, and we'll talk more specifically about depression, which I believe is the one stage that most people get in and they can't get themselves out of it because it is so painful. All right, so we're talking about depression, the 4th stage of grief. And in my situation specifically, what I noticed I was engulfed in was this negative self-talk that was pre-programmed when I was younger. And so there's a whole list of them. We're looking at, I come from this very dysfunctional household. And more specifically in this dysfunctional household, my mom was very passive aggressive. My dad was very emotionally and physically dominating and abusive. On 2 occasions, I believe I talked about these 2 occasions in my life in scenarios where I came into the house yelling and screaming. I mean, I was in pain from 2 accidents that I was in. And I believe these happened about 2 years apart. But what's powerful is my dad's reaction was the same. Shut up with that noise. That's exactly what my dad said to me. So I internalized that be seen and not heard, that my pain didn't matter, that I need to suck it up and get out of his way. You're a gnat. You're just nothing. So I meant nothing to him. But also what I internalized with that was that if I wanted to be in his presence, I must be perfect. I must be great. So it drove me to be very, very successful in sports, because I said, if he doesn't want me at my worst, he must want me at my best. So I must be my best at all times. So it almost killed me in my desire to be good. Okay? So that was what was going through my head. The other thing is, this pre-programmed belief system is now all of a sudden we're going back to childhood. We're going back to kindergarten. We're going back to that. I was such a disruption in the house. My mom put me into school early, which created all kind of deficiencies because I wasn't ready. Every area, math, science, reading, I was deficient, to the point where I was introduced into the special ed program. I fought tooth and nail to get out of there because it reminded me too much of just feeling like I was retarded. Okay, so you got that, and then now I'm carrying that through, and the only thing that's saving me is my ability to play sports at a very high level, which there was an attendance component attached to it. So it made me go to school as much as I did not want to. But if I wanted to play sports, we didn't have all these club sports and all this other stuff. If you wanted to play, you had to play for the school team. So you had to be good. So that kept me in school. So now I'm going through a school system, clearly different markers showing that I was deficient. Nobody said anything. So I graduate through high school with a 1.51 grade point average. So I'm getting through, but I don't feel very smart. But my elite athletic ability now does something else. It shields me from the responsibility and accountability of being a regular person. Because I had money, and I talked about this before. But now, as I reflect back on these things, I get more depressed. Then I look at the opportunity of baseball. I get injured. Now, the very thing that was allowing me to seem successful was now taken away. Wasted opportunity. So I'm feeling guilty. And the more that I complain, the more that I get deeper and deeper into this level of depression, I begin to find comfort in it. Because I'm sure there's some psychological research that things you think about. If I'm constantly in this happy state, I look for this happy state. If I'm constantly in this depressed state, I start looking for and feeling very comfortable in the depressed state. And that's what I was doing. And one of the things that I chose as an addiction, no drugs or anything, it was porn. It was pornography. Now think about it today. You can actually pick your phone up and pull up porn and look. You can bury yourself in porn for hours for free. That's how available it is now. It wasn't that accessible. So I either had to buy the videos or I had to go rent them. And see how much work I had to go buy it, rent it. I had the VCR, and then I had to plug it in, and whatever, I'm doing my thing, and then all the other stuff. And then I have to go return it back to the store and all this other stuff. It was just a long, drawn-out process. And then what happened at the very end was that I felt just as bad, because I would do everything, I would have this orgasm, and then I would be right back to rock bottom, feeling empty. Now I'm out like a wolf. I'm searching. I'm getting out in the clubs, and I'm looking for somebody vulnerable. I'm looking for the signals of somebody that's going to take me to that place that I'm trying to get to feel better about myself. And at the same time all this is going on in this depressed state, I'm being irresponsible as far as relationships. So I'm bouncing around to different people. I'm being irresponsible as far as me trying to go back to school. Didn't know what I really wanted to study. Couldn't focus in class. So I was in and out, academic probation, all that stuff. And then the other thing is, I couldn't hold a job. My depressed state was interfering with everything. And all that stuff converged together and I ended up being homeless. So now I'm spiraling even further. And now that self-talk is, you're no good, you're dumb as a student, you can't even keep a job, you can't even keep a relationship. So I am spiraling deeper and deeper and deeper. And then that's where I ended up getting involved with the armed robbery. Now I'm spiraling again. But at that point, I had hit such a bottom that I can't even tell you. There was a moment where I met with my lawyer in prison, and she shared with me that I was facing anywhere from 19 to 67 years in prison. And then I remember coming back to my cell and saying, basically, I've had it. I've done everything in my power to bring myself to this position. Now, Carlton, what are you going to do now? And I said, I can't do anything else. I am putting this over into your hands. Now, that your God or whatever power that I was submitting to, humbling myself to, that's where it began. And so that's the point where I started taking college courses. I started attending counseling classes, and I started reading, and I started really reading about psychology. And what was revealed as I now was reversing the depressed state, I revealed that I was in depression. And then I started tracking it back. And I realized that I was somewhere in a range of about 7 or 8 years where I was in this very depressed state. And so what I also learned was, in the book, I talk specifically about what I call the dilemma of the poverty conscious. And that is when you are in such a low state, and it's very similar to projection in psychology, is that you look at yourself. In projection, you're looking at yourself and you're seeing the flaws. In the dilemma of the poverty conscious, you maybe unconsciously see the flaws in yourself. But what you do to try to make yourself feel better is you go out into the world and try to help other people's lives. You try to help other people, or you try to latch on to the success of others. And when you do that, you feel great about yourself. But then you remove yourself from that environment, or move yourself from that action that you're doing, and then you go right back to feeling like shit about yourself. And then you realize, oh, I need to get out of here. So then you go right back into that world again, doing something for others, latching yourself onto other people. Does that sound familiar? If you're not doing that, then you know someone else that has been doing that. Because I'm telling you, that's exactly what I was doing. Trying to get out of some, either being in some sort of relationship or something, in and out, whatever it was. But then you keep feeling empty, so you leave your world. And that we've seen that in pastors. We've seen that in parents that have children that are struggling. They neglect their kids, and they go to try to make someone else's life feel better, and they leave those kids behind. Okay? So with that said, is you're trying to pacify others while you're in this state, and it's a cycle. You feel good for a second, you get out of there, you feel like crap. You feel good, and you cannot understand why you're feeling so good in the presence of others, but in the presence of yourself, you feel like shit. That's a part of that depressed state. And the other thing that I learned is that this is probably the longest state, and it's the darkest state. So as I mentioned earlier in this video, a lot of times people do not make it out of it because it is so painful. You go back into the bargaining. You go back into being angry. You go back into the denial. You start going backwards instead of going forwards and fighting yourself through. And I'm saying that because that's exactly what I did. I felt terrible. But I kept fighting. I want to say God, I give that glory. But as far as I knew, it was a lot with myself as well, where I just said, I am going to fight through this. Because I was lazy as far as getting here. I said, if I fight a little bit, I believe I can fight right through this. And I fought and I fought and I fought. It was the most painful time of my life. Whew, it was painful. But I got through it. And so as I got through that depressed state, I began to accept where I was. And again, I mentioned it before. That's when I really started taking the college courses and really start paying attention. And that, my friend, as I move to the next stage, which is acceptance, that's when I ask myself the three questions. Carlton, what do you want? Why do you want it? And can you actually see yourself accomplishing that? And then, at some point I'll show, I think I've showed in the other videos, I'll show the documentation of what I was doing when I started setting those goals. Because let me show you something. This is when I was going back and forth and looking at my life and digging myself a hole. This is what I was doing. I was reflecting on this. I remembered that I was this guy, high school phenom. I was like, great, now you're not that guy anymore. Then I went and said, then you go from being this high school phenom to this professional pitcher with the Chicago Cubs. And I go, you're not that guy anymore. It was great, but you're not that guy anymore. Then I found this, and now look real closely. Look at what that says. It says, all eyes on Hamilton. Cubs prospect could come in a hurry. And if you read a little bit of this article, this was the #1 magazine as far as talking about the major leagues and the minors at the time. This was Baseball America. I don't follow baseball as much as I could or should just to keep up with things. But what this article talked about, and I'm going to read a little bit of it to you. It says, left-hander Carlton Hamilton, the Cubs' top prospect. I was the #1 prospect in the organization. And here's the Gordon Goldsberry is talking to the magazine and explaining to them is that I'm going to start out in AA, Class AA baseball. And if I do things that I need to do, just show that I can throw strikes, I can be reliable, I will be in the big leagues. And when that article came out, I was 21 years old. Think about that, 21 years old, and I was right on the doorstep of becoming a professional, paid, generation transforming money. Okay. But all that came crashing down. So all those things came to a head. And so now I was coming out of it and saying, hey, look, that was my past. Now I'm starting to try to formulate this future. And that future was I started asking myself the three questions. What do you want? Why do you want it? And can you see it? And when I did that, that took me out of that depressed state, and I was going into the next phase, which is acceptance. So in the next video, I'm going to talk specifically about the things that I did as I started to accept where I was. So then once I knew where I was, I could then plan out my greatness, where I was going. So like this video, subscribe to this page, share this video. This is Carlton Hamilton. This is Plan Your Greatness. Thank you all for joining. And I'm going to say this again. Plan your greatness, because no one else will. I'll see you guys all next time.